Hi, I'm Roberto Castro with CapTech Consulting, and on behalf of our chairman, Sandy Williamson, we're just so proud to be a partner of the PGA of America, sponsor this industry stage. I've been around the last 2 days, some of the smartest folks in the industry having really compelling conversations. One of the hottest conversations in the golf industry right now is TGL, and I've been fortunate to spend the last 2+ years working with the TGL team as a small part of bringing it to life. And I can tell you, I'm part of a bigger crew at CapTech that's working with TGL as the official data partner. But the last 3 months, I've been in South Florida a lot at the SoFi Center, and I can tell you the response of people when they walk into that building is, I think I've heard nuts, crazy, this is insane, this is amazing, you can't believe this unless you see it. They've captured a lot of that content when the players walk in for the first time, and I promise you it is authentic. They have not had to do a second take on any of those walk-in videos. How did this happen? It was a big collaborative effort. Actually, I saw in the news this week that this is not the only big trade show happening in the world. In Davos right now, the World Economic Forum is happening, and the theme this year is collaboration for the intelligent age. And I thought that really applied to TGL. It really is how it came to be. How can we do amazing things by working together? So joining me to talk about that, we have Scott Armstrong from TGL. He's the VP of Competition Technology. Evan El Sayed from VP of Product Innovation at Full Swing. Joining us from Top Tracer, Oscar Asgard. He's a Senior Product Manager. And then from Sinlon, we have Matt Saxton, a President of Sinlon. So guys, thanks a lot for joining me. Before we start telling some stories about kind of the long and winding road that brought TGL to life, we'll share a video of that you can reference as these guys mention some of the milestones along the way.
So let me introduce you to TGL.
I want to keep it. It's a lot of fun. Oh, nice. Oh, this is sick. No, that's cool. Yeah, that's good. Let's golf.
All right, Scott, I think a question a lot of folks have had, they turn on ESPN, they see TGL. Whose idea was this? Like, it has to be a question. Mike McCarley, Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy are the founders. You've been there since maybe day 2, so kind of give us the origin story and the thesis behind TGL.
Yeah, it really started, it's kind of a COVID baby, I'd call it. Mike McCarley came up with the concept, and so he worked on it for almost 2 years before I was brought on. So the concept was there. There was a kind of a base set of rules and format and an idea of what he wanted to build. And then I came on in August of 2022 and really was given the keys. and kind of the runway to take his idea and run with it and try to prove it out and try to figure out who the best tech partners would be to bring alongside. What should the rules and format be? CapTech, was one of our, original partners that helped us with that to create, an entertainment product with the best players in the world. So it was a really cool, format or a layout to be able to start with, and to kind of figure out who these key partners should be.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a recurring theme, is the requirements for something this innovative didn't exist, right? I know early on, CapTech sat down with the TGL team and had to put kind of some substance and scope around what it would take to bring this to life. Evan, you were also a key part, and Full Swing was a key part. So tell me about those early meetings. Like, what was the initial scope of what you were building at TGL, and then how did it change along the way, and how did y'all manage that process?
Sure. The initial scope was really just a vision, I think, at the point where Scott came out. The idea that it was going to be stadium golf, and we need to be a partner in kind of a mixed reality solution where you're hitting into a screen, which is kind of at the core of our business. We make golf simulators, launch monitors, software, and uniquely a virtual green, so an undulating green that lend itself really well to that idea of a kind of fixed capacity stadium. So that was originally, I think, probably the keystone of the entire project was the virtual green tech. We're one of the only folks that can really do that in the industry. But our involvement in golf simulation, software development, there's other key partners out there. And really, we kind of worked with Scott and said, here's what we can do. And showed Scott and the team, worked with them on business requirements. So like, what do we want to do? Have you thought of this or that? One key thing that came out of those collaborations, which were over 2 months long, writing business and technical requirements, was things like the digital caddy, which, at the surface level, just kind of strategizing before each player takes a shot seemed maybe gimmicky and didn't really lend itself to professional golf and how it is today. But the more we started getting involved with it, the more we started adding scope on, and now it's kind of the belle of the ball as far as strategy and these guys interfacing before shots and before the match even. So it was a really fun, truly a definition of collaboration and innovation in its purest form. Not knowing necessarily, how to get there, but every day kind of just adapting to the situation and having the key players and key partners to really make this thing come to life.
Yeah, I think the digital caddy is an interesting one. I mean, we work with companies every day on like progression of technology, and it's a perfect example of a tool that people will use. Like, it's not going to put caddies out of business. Like, there's a world where that digital caddy will live in the yardage books of PGA Tour caddies because it gives you all the data instantaneously. It's dynamic. It's amazing. You still need the caddy, but it gives them a better tool. I love watching the guys use it during the telecast. You mentioned the combination of like writing requirements. Like, our CapTech team spent a couple days in Carlsbad with you.
Oh, yeah.
And what were some of the key outputs? If you're tackling a project this big, like, what do you need to get on paper to move it forward?
Well, I think understanding where you're trying to go with the data kind of leads you back into what do we need to do to create an architecture to facilitate the communication between our systems from the input, whether it's Top Tracer, the Full Swing inputs, from the game, tying that to a player, and then ultimately sending this data packet in a way that can be received by the CapTech folks and then displayed out to third parties, ESPN, whoever it might be. So understanding where you're trying to go is so important for figuring out how you're going to build for that future. And so having those business requirements with you guys early on was imperative because you guys kind of came to us more polished on what the deliverable needs to be from your side. And it kind of helped us architect a system that would, propagate that. So
that was a really cool moment at the Full Swing headquarters. It was they have this guy named Andy Gickling who's a vendor of theirs, and he was on the whiteboard, hair raised like a mad scientist, and we were, that's where digital caddy. Yeah. We realized we didn't have a digital caddy and that we needed a digital caddy in that room, yeah, along with a lot of other systems that are core to our competition game now.
Yeah, it was really exciting, and again, just bringing a lot of smart people together and dedicating time and focus to something without requirements. I would say this: to execute the way that we had to execute, without defining clear requirements on the business side and the technical side, there's just no other way to do it across this many vendors and sub-vendors to come together like this is truly remarkable.
Oscar, so the TGL SoFi Center is a one of one, right? The players are hitting from 30 plus yards from the screen. I want to hear more about kind of what existed at Full Swing and then what was built. But tell us about the Top Tracer piece. I remember checking my email like right before Christmas in 22, I believe. And Scott said, I'm on a plane to Sweden. We need to go, there's some interesting tech that could really level this up. So tell us about that trip and kind of how Top Tracer got on the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a super exciting journey for us at Top Tracer. When TGL reached out, and Scott, you worked a lot with our founder, Daniel Forsgren, who founded Top Tracer back in the day, and really knowing what we could do at driving ranges. So we're the world leaders in like pioneering multi-bay tracking, and we're at 1,000 ranges outdoors, but we're also at a couple of indoor facilities, and that's what you got to see in Sweden there, like an actual dome, a hitting dome indoors. And we transformed it. We had your idea of the vision, right? And then Daniel and Ludwig and the team got the task of, can we build this? Can we try to build the vision you have here with a huge screen and multiple hitting surfaces, which I think is a kind of a key part in this as well, that you wanted in a traditional simulator, you'll often be hitting from like AstroTurf, but you wanted it to be like actual grass and bunker and rough. So that's basically what we built for you when you came to Stockholm there in, was it October 22, right?
Yeah, October, November of 2022.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't be prouder of the team that hung that huge projector on the wall to kind of simulate what you have in the SoFi Center today. Because as you say, Roberto, it's a one of one right now, but we, on that day, I'd say like we had an embryo of what the SoFi Center actually looks like today.
We were really close to not making that trip. We were kicking and screaming about the idea of a screen being 35 yards away. We just couldn't, back then, we just couldn't get that vision of how the heck we would build this building to fit that, and how big the screen actually needed to be to make that work. I remember there was a hurricane in Orlando, where our headquarters is here in Winter Park, and we were out of our office, and so we were in kind of a WeWork space. And the Top Tracer guy said, can you get on a demo? We've rented out, one of our indoor domes, and we've got a prototype for you to see. And again, we were kind of kicking and screaming, but we did it just because, we wanted to be, good friends. And we were over a Zoom call, watching them hit shots into a screen that was 35 yards away from a bunker and from a fairway and from rough. And they were showing us what the output looked like and what the camera angles could look like. And it definitely whetted our appetite. And they said, you guys got to come see this. And we almost, even after that, we were like, I don't know if we should really make the trip over there. This is still kind of so far-fetched. But Daniel and Andrew McCauley, who was the CTO back then of Topgolf, that's our CTO now of Tomorrow Sports, they begged us to just come see it for ourselves. And once we got there, it was just a life-changing, or at least a career-changing, or Tomorrow Sports TGL-changing experience that we couldn't unsee what we saw. This ball being hit from 35 yards away from a screen. I'm in that video there. I'm lefty. I hit a pretty big draw, or hook, and I could see my ball start to curve, hit the screen, and then continue on in the virtual world. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, and I couldn't unsee that and couldn't unfeel that, and we had to make it happen.
It was a cool vibe. I remember you standing there and really trying to like hit different shots, and I think that kind of shot shaping into the screen obviously it's a few select people who've been in the SoFi Center, but when you stand there and you see that screen, like it's a very unique setting where you're much more in a like arena type world with a golf course there, even if it's virtual, right? And the fact that like mirroring where it hits the screen and it continues creates a really cool environment. I think the players echo that quite a lot.
Yeah, there's a PGA show connection too, because maybe 6-8 weeks after y'all made that trip, we were here and you said, hey, come down to the Top Tracer setup down there and hit shots. The nets are about, and same as the setup is now, go check it out. The nets are 30 yards away from.
Exactly, yeah.
And it was like, how does this feel? How is this different? And I remember thinking, I tried to hit it lower because I didn't want to hit it too high, but then the concept was like, no, the screen will be 65 feet high. So PGA show connection. And then when you talk about like what the player reaction is, I was at SoFi Center when Tiger came in the first time, and Tiger's folks were always concerned about him being able to hit like a little cut, basically. Like he likes to just hit this bleeder cut, and if it doesn't show up in the system, we've got a huge problem. That's a red flag situation. So he shows up, and we're all kind of standing there, and he tees up the first driver and like hits just left of center of the screen and just peels off like 6 or 8 yards. And he kind of like looks at us, and he was like, it was exactly the shot he wanted to see. So kind of fast forwarding to the end there, I'm getting out of order, but that was a big moment for sure. Before we get into the green zone, which is amazing, Evan, like what existed, you know, before TGL, and then what had to be rebuilt? Like I think the game engine part, like you know, tying all these things together, you know, back to that theme, like collaboration for the intelligent age. Like there was a lot of computer engineering and software development that had to happen in addition to the tracking tech.
Yeah, I mean, once we kind of identified the key components that we were going to contribute to the system, I mean, everything that we contributed was almost a 10 to 12x scale from what we've done today. A good example is, you know, the game itself. Obviously, that was one where we had to re-architect the whole platform, simply because Scott didn't have the rules down yet. So we had to abstract the game logic, and basically we said make the game dumb, but basically make it so that an operator who could sit outside could adapt and say, okay, I want, you know, player or team 1, team 2 to go. You know, Scott was toying around with some different rules, formats, and so I think that was a real big challenge was, you know, rightfully so, you trying to do your market research while we're trying to build a system that could accommodate whatever your, you know, resulting output was. So that was one thing on the game side, but and then, you know, scaling that up to the screen obviously had its own inherent challenges, but nine projectors helps, the clarity. And then as far as, you know, some of the tracking components that we have, you know, bringing our launch monitors to a commercial grade quality, that took some engineering and just making sure that we could deliver something on time, and we had kind of fail-safe mechanisms, which is true throughout the system. And then the virtual green. I mean, our commercial product has 55 of those actuators that you've seen in those videos underneath, and then Scott asked for 600.
So
that's
the virtual green, if you've watched TGL, the green itself has 3 virtual greens on it. So picture 3 rectangles. Each of those rectangles has 2 holes cut into it. So kind of the left side of the green, the right side, and that top shelf are 3 separate virtual greens. And it's 600 actuators per each one.
Close to. So
Yeah.
it's
Each
600 in
rectangle is
total.
27 feet by 15 feet.
Yeah.
So, you know, doing that and making sure that you've got the right power, and then again, if one of those jacks goes out, you know, how do you handle that? So, you know, we had a core competency in each part of our contribution to the tech stack. It's making sure that we could scale it up, and then we created a system dashboard now, which we use in the back, which, you know, green means go, everything is good. And then if it turns yellow or red, we have to go root cause, diagnose, swap out on the fly. So that, I mean, we've never been on live broadcast before, and it was a challenge we were willing to accept, and so far so good.
Yeah, a challenge we're willing to accept is a recurring theme at TGL. I mean, the live piece is underrated, right? I've always said if something goes out electronically on PGA Tour golf, you can still hand out scorecards and go play. TGL is really, really dependent on technology working live on ESPN, and it's, you know, accepting that challenge and executing on it has been really fun to watch. So, all right, we kind of got there with the actuators and the virtual green, but the entire SoFi Center is synthetic turf, other than the tee pads, right? Those are hoisted in. They're each about 1,200 pounds. That's a whole separate awesome. There's a nursery in the back with real grass, and the players were so excited about hitting off real grass. But Matt, tell us about, you know, kind of the process of dialing in something at this scale, some lessons you brought to the table, and then what exists now at SoFi Center.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, working with TGL and Tomorrow Sports has been really a dream come true for us at Sinlon, and a culmination of many years of us sort of before this started trying to figure out how we can not only build a good putting green, but how we can build a performance system that works for a variety of golfers. And then at the TGL level, it's like, how can we build something that, you know, a high level, top ranked PGA Tour professional is going to enjoy? So I know the process started a little bit before I was involved. So I think I believe about 2 years ago at the PGA show there was a meet and greet, and I think Sinlon and Tomorrow Sports discovered each other and said, hey, we might be some opportunity here, and then from there's some testing, and it all starts with the turf. So Sinlon is a turf manufacturer, so we're trying to take, especially on the golf side, from the putting greens that you see at the your mini golf centers that have been around for 50, 60, 70 years to like the backyard putting greens, and then kind of driving that industry into systems that work in all applications, high-level professionals, even getting into performance centers for colleges, and then maybe one day we can develop a performance center that's going to work in a real golf course application. So that's been Sinlon's mindset for many years, and this opportunity was just awesome and just fit well with where we wanted to go. So again, it started with the turf. We have a really special triple shear nylon turf that's best on the market. We do all kinds of testing on it, true ball roll. We've got this GS3 ball from the USGA, and we're measuring the trueness of the roll and how the ball is going to stop when it's chipping and things like that. So you start with the turf, and then how's that turf going to react to different chipping situations? So Scott and I first met, I believe it was probably late spring of 2023. And I had a really cool opportunity to build pretty much a full performance center at a residence in St. Augustine, Florida. And so Scott came out and we hit some chip shots onto it, and we were using a very specific system there that would accept shots up to 200 yards. So we said, hey, this is a great place to start. This works. It works outside. It works over top of a rock base, but how is it going to work in a TGL center? So I think the next step was to start on the path of building these testing centers. So we went through 3 different locations, at least that I was involved with, 2 in Orlando and 1 in Palm Beach. We showed up and we said, hey, this is what we know will work for our customers, but we need to figure out, number one, is it going to work with all the technology that you guys are bringing in? And then number 2, is it something that the PGA Tour players are going to enjoy playing on a daily basis? So we went through a series of 4, 5, 6 different test screen builds. We built one. It said, hey, it works great, but it's not quite working with the technology the way we want it to. So again, we know different types of systems that work, but it's just a matter of like what systems will work and what systems are going to work well with the technology that they're bringing in. So
and to be clear, the scope that was asked was, we need you to have a surface that can be played on that's on top of some areas that have all these jacks and plates under it, and some that don't. Yep. And also, we need it to roll perfect and to be able to hit shots into it and bounce, check, and spin, not just for the average golfer, but to appeal to the eye of the top players in the world. So, pretty high bar to get to. And if you watch, TGL now, and that's probably one of my. There's a lot of cool tech and there's a lot of cool things in the venue, but I get the luxury or the privilege to host all of our players for the first time when they come into SoFi Center. And the first thing I do before they hit shots into the screen is I just give them a bag of balls and just hit shots into our green. And to see that kind of twinkle in their eye when they see the ball bounce, check, and spin probably way better than they thought it would, and as close, pretty much as close to real as you can get. That's one of my biggest joys I get now to get to do that. And kudos to Sinlon for being along with us for the last 2 years to iterate, to think outside the box of like, how are we going to get this green to perform at this high level?
Yeah, and the final product, Scott mentioned it, but Oscar's favorite TGL player, Ludwig Oberg,
isn't that all's favorite TGL player, right?
So Ludwig said, he said he's played plenty of indoor winter golf in Sweden, and said he's never seen anything like the TGL green as far as responsiveness and the way it plays. So you mentioned some of the testing. I'll kind of kick the testing story off. I think it's one of the coolest parts of TGL. You saw a lot of it on the video, but Evan called Scott out for not having the rules figured out. The first one, we had talked about the rules, and I was like, look, we've got to play a match somewhere, but we don't have an arena to play in. So the first ever TGL match took place at kind of an entertainment type bar place north of Atlanta in Alpharetta. Scott flew up. I got a bunch of ex-Georgia Tech golfers, mini tour golfers, and we would hit into the simulator, and then we would run outside where they had a little putting course. You're supposed to grab a cocktail on and putt. And we just made it work. And it was alternate shot. Was it scramble? Is it, you play 6 holes and then the next guy, we had all these ideas and we figured out what worked and what didn't pretty quickly, right? We realized like we can't have Tiger just sitting on the bench for 35 minutes. And that was one of our initial tests. So we started writing those requirements, but as TGL progressed, the kind of bartainment was not an adequate test venue. So Scott, I mean, I didn't even know what a soundstage was. Apparently it's where you shoot movies, but tell us about finding a soundstage in Orlando at Universal and just building, and then what these folks were able to learn in those venues.
Yeah, that was it was always an idea of like what kind of venue could we build a mini version of what we're going to build eventually in SoFi Center. And so there was always an idea of a soundstage because it doesn't, if you're in a warehouse, it's going to have these supporting poles everywhere. You can't hit golf shots in. We also needed as high as possible of a ceiling. And so we knew a soundstage was probably our best bet, but finding sound stages is not easy. We happen to be headquartered here where Universal Studios is, and so we were lucky to coordinate with the Universal Studios folks, and they had an open soundstage for us. We were able to rent one out, and I think it was around March or April of 23, and we outfitted it with a 60-foot by 30-foot screen. We were able to hit shots up to about 32 yards away from the screen. But that was kind of the beginning of making this all come together and testing the tech, and then we continued our testing, right? And we played test matches after that first Fairway Social one. Then we would do test after test after test in there and start refining our rules and our format and how long should the shot clock be? What should the penalty be? All the different things that we had to figure out. But having the real, as close to real, venue there was massive. And we also built, probably a 1/3 size green with a virtual green underneath it. And that's where we were able to start iterating on what should be the underlayment between the virtual green and the synthetic turf. So that was a massive, and another thing where we were close to kind of like the Sweden trip, we were close to I don't know, do we need this? Do we not need it? And now looking back, we've had 3 sound stages and they've all been needed.
And I can't tell you how much work it was to put these together. I mean, they don't make me put a hard hat on and swing a hammer, but just imagine moving, right? The most stressful thing you can do, but moving into your dream home and you're having to custom build out the whole thing, and then 3 months later you do it again, and then 3 months later you do it again. So you guys get the phone call. I mean, Evan, tell us about that first sound stage. You're like, wait, so I got to do the whole thing, but it's just temp, and then I got to do it. I mean, what was your reaction?
I mean, my reaction was we have to prove out everything we possibly can. Yeah. I think at the time, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but we had about a month and a half, maybe, a month and a half to move from the soundstage to the arena, where there were some things we couldn't even test in the soundstage. I mean, we could test messages that we would send to the turntable to say, hey, rotate, but nothing was there to rotate. Right. And the turntable you could see from satellites, because I looked at it on Google Maps, and there it was. So, yeah, I mean, it was everything, but we communicated a lot internally. We set up our networks at the soundstage, something that we could mimic again, and all of our engineers said it's really good, but we'll know definitively when we get into the arena. So that's just the way it works. But I mean, we learned everything we needed to, and luckily we practiced so much that once we got there, it was pretty seamless, I would say.
And I think if you look at our collaboration there with your virtual world and our tracking and getting that together, the teams working together to actually make sure that the ball actually does start in the virtual world where it ends up on the screen. There was a lot of collaborative efforts on really making sure this tech got together and in the way that you could have it on ESPN. I mean, like you alluded to, Scott, it's high pressure. You need to make sure that it works when it's there, right?
Yeah, that was a funny story. We needed to extend our soundstage visit, but Universal couldn't let us extend because Halloween Horror Nights was coming in, and they needed to make one of their horror houses. So we had to move about 100 yards and take all of our tech and move it to another soundstage, which was a big pain, but we learned a lot. from transporting it, because then we needed to transport all that, or a lot of it, to SoFi Center eventually.
Yeah, I don't think you could rank them what was most important to test, but I think the green was a huge part of it, right? I mean, the blood, sweat, and tears of moving 3 sound stages. Tell us every time, some adjustments you could make, you take player feedback. I thought that was the most interesting every time. Scott would call me and say, hey, the next one's ready, come down. And then the first thing he would do, just like at SoFi, was, hey, get on the green, tell me what you think.
Right, yeah. So we were constantly, adapting our strategies and install techniques because, again, we've never installed on top of a moving system before, and let alone some of it's on top of foam. So it was challenging to get. So after the first test stage, the first underlayment system we tried, we realized it wasn't the best, wasn't going to work as well with the technology. So we did pretty quickly figure out a performance system that would work. So once we figured that out, it's just a matter of now how do we dial that in so we get the right reactions, the right putting speed, the right stimp speed for the players themselves. So every time we rebuilt the green and tore it down and rebuilt it again, I think each time, once we figured out the foundation of it, it was just a matter of little things that we think about, like which way are we. Believe it or not, turf actually has a grain on it. Even a putting green surface, it has a slight grain on it. So even little things like, do the players prefer chipping into the grain or do they prefer chipping away from the grain? Obviously, that kind of goes out the window when the green starts smoothing or starts spinning. But little details like that on how we install the turf, and ultimately, how do we get the stimp speed exactly where we want it for the venue? So stimp speed, shot reaction, and then, of course, each time, too, we're testing out different fairway turfs, different rough turfs, and things like that. And again, just taking player feedback, and if the feedback would say, hey, this turf, we don't like it for this reason, then we'd recommend another turf. And we just kept trying them. And so each time we rebuilt it, from the turf side, it was very helpful to us because we were able to kind of refine the product and get it closer to what the end user wanted it.
Yeah, I learned so much about Matt's business. It's fascinating. You wouldn't think that artificial turf could require as much maintenance as real green grass, but it does. You have a humidity element, you have the indoor element, and then what makes the light bulb go off is if I go to my club and I take a divot out of the green, in 10 days it grows back. It actually replaces itself. You really have to baby artificial turf at the SoFi Center, and I think you guys have a great it has to be constantly monitored because once it's there, it doesn't grow back. It really needs it's a whole separate branch of agronomy, if that makes sense. And your business is fascinating for sure. Scott, building the green, the one that we see on ESPN, it's a rotating turntable. It has the 3 tiers. I think a cool story that people would enjoy. You built a real one, actually in the dirt. You got to play in the dirt. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that was a cool. Again, something we didn't know we needed, but it is part of the story now. We have 3 different golf course designers that design our holes. So we have Pisa, and we have Bo Welling, and we have the Nicholas group. And so Nicholas is based right there in Palm Beach Gardens, right near our venue. And so we had a visit there, and they said, hey, we're building Panther National down the street. Can we just build your green zone for you just to prove it out and see if the slopes are what you want and see if it's the size you want? And of course we said yes, because that would be stupid to say no. And so that was a crazy moment. It looked like a desert when we went out there. There was no grass or anything, and they built our green zone to scale, and and it's in the video that we showed earlier, just to prove out, because you couldn't. The only way you could see it is in a kind of on a computer screen. We had a virtual headset we could see it in, but to actually walk on it and stand on it and roll balls on it and see if you see our green, some might call it extreme. I call it entertaining. It's got 3 distinct tiers. You might see players having to chip over from one side to the other, but it's entertaining. If we would have made the thing flat, this whole thing would have fallen flat. So to see that in real life before we actually built it in SoFi Center was amazing.
All right, let's go down the line. I just want to hear, getting into SoFi Center, what was the last surprise? Like you said, Evan, you can't test it until you're really in the real thing. And I'll just give one example. The tracing technology, it's light dependent, right? It works differently in a dark room than a bright room. Well, now you're in an arena, and the production team is making a TV show, and they have over 100 lights that are trying to put good light on a TV show. It's interfering with some of their systems. So what was that one last hurdle when you were in SoFi Center, and any wake up in the middle of the night moments, or was it pretty smooth?
I woke up in the middle of every night, but I will say that the thing that there were two things that we couldn't really test in its full capacity. One of them being the turntable rotation. That thing has been sitting there for a year. And then the second thing was the Skymark lighting system that we put together. So we could test it on a small scale. And for those who are not familiar, that's what kind of spots the ball when you're transitioning from virtual play to the real world. So that was something that's, it's dependent on the exact specifications of the usable area. And so that was kind of something that we had to QA, I think, pretty extensively, but we got it down. Everything else I felt really good about. I mean, we drilled this thing hard, and and that's a testament to the test plan. Yeah.
Oscar, what about you?
Yeah, I think from our side, like we have a lot of experience in the broadcast space, and we know that when it comes to game time, like you'll want to add some glitter and flair and stuff, and it was always like, okay, what's the are we gonna get surprises in the arena that come from the like the broadcast side? How to create a really cool broadcast, and would that have any impact on all the stuff that we've been testing in? You mentioned like the sound stages, etc. Like not until you are in that arena can you really verify it. So I think when we had our kind of steer group meeting and got the message from SoFi Center that the testing was like that was a cool moment for us. That it's tried and tested by the best in the world. So that was cool.
Matt, what was the jump to SoFi Center? Or were you set when you got there?
I don't know if I'd say we were set. So we kind of knew what we were getting ourselves into in terms of just being on a construction site. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on, a lot of moving parts, a lot of people trying to get their parts done while we're doing that. That's certainly one side of it, something where you never really prepared for, but you know it's going to happen. Technically speaking, it was a very difficult install. So the best way to think about it is if you ever take a piece of wrapping paper and you try to wrap a basketball, right? Wrapping paper is not meant to go around a basketball. And then you add a 28-ounce backing on synthetic turf, and we're trying to wrap that turf around all the different slopes. And for those of you guys who haven't been on site, the slopes are pretty severe. The green complex slopes, even in the fairway, there's some mounding and some like a grass bunker area. There's a lot of areas where that turf, doesn't want to wrap around that basketball. So a lot of the challenge, and thankfully we've got a lot of great installers that work for us, is just trying to figure out how to get everything to fit well without wrinkling, without anything that's going to look bad on TV. So the install itself was definitely challenging. We've challenged ourselves before. We've, personally, my company's done some pretty large green complexes, but a lot of times we're designing those complexes in mind with how we're going to install the turf. So this one was a little bit more challenging because again, it's like the complex was designed and we had to figure out how to make the turf work. Beyond that, I mean, just figuring out little things like sometimes you're engineering little things like transitions, like how do you transition from the actual part that turns to the fairway itself. That stuff's easy to model, but sometimes when you get on an actual construction site, sometimes you're going to have to engineer some ways to make it work. And it really just a lot of things like that, all the technology they brought in. I mean, we spent so much time wrapping some of their cameras in turf and just really trying to figure out ways to make it look good on TV for everybody. And it was really fun. I mean, my guys still talk about it. They're super proud of it. But it was definitely a challenge. It was not an easy install.
Well, the final product is amazing. If you haven't been to SoFi Center, get down to South Florida, check it out. It's so smooth that every last detail of your install, and then Tanner, who's the kind of superintendent, he'll mow or vacuum. I'm not sure what the right word is. Fairway stripes. When he preps for a match and you walk out there, you don't even want to walk on the turf. It's so perfect. So, you mentioned it, the pride that your folks have in kind of having done something that ambitious. We feel it at CapTech. It's kind of a signal of what's possible. Collaborating together. But just what's a bold prediction, or what does TGL say to the market about what's possible for, each of your businesses and kind of the industry as a whole? I'd love to hear that, Evan.
Yeah, I think for many years, golf and technology in golf has been behind tech as a trend, right, in the market. And I think working with such great companies, I think we were able to, kind of put maybe conflicting egos or specialties behind us and really work towards a common goal and really celebrate, the best that tech has to offer in the modern age, like today in tech, and bring it to golf. And that really to me is, I think, something I'm most proud of and something that we can continue to iterate on. The system is built for scale and growth, and we can continue to add features. You know, there's 90 cameras. I don't know if we've seen all the different angles yet, but I definitely think there's so much, you know, room to improve and iterate in the future. I'm just so happy to be a part of it, and truly one of the best innovations I can say I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, I agree. I think the collaboration piece is huge. You know, I keep going back to it, but for the industry, for the golf industry, for the consumer, the golfer, to have great experiences that are tech-enabled, there is going to need to be some of those, you know, coffee meetings or sit down at dinner and say, hey, we're going to work together here, right? I mean, I think about it all the time. Like, if Nintendo had said it can only be played on Sony TVs 30 years ago, you'd have a lot less gamers out there today. So that may not be a one-to-one comparison, but Oscar, I know you guys have led in this space for years and years. Like, what's next? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, where do we go? I think what's cool to see with what we've seen over the past years, like a couple of years ago, participation in off-course actually was more than it was on-course. And like, I'm a true believer that those are mutually beneficial. I think that what Top Tracer has proven is if you go to a driving range that has tech, it's a lot more fun. And I mean, in this project together with all the different partners, it's kind of proving that, hey, we've all seen golf simulators before, but we've never seen anything like the SoFi Center, right? And I think one of the reactions that I get and a lot of friends get when they watch it is like, hey, I would want to be there. Like, I would want to be standing there with a group of friends having some fun. And I think it brings a new cool aspect to the game. It kind of shows that tech and golf, they do belong together. And at Top Tracer, we're just super proud to be playing a part of that. Yeah,
it really is cool seeing golf lead the way. You know, at CapTech, we're convinced it's the first of many sports that look for engaging, modern, fast-paced, tech-driven ways to grow their fan base, to grow their participation rates, and I just love that golf is leading it. Scott, you're living it every day. You know, tell us, we're 3 weeks in the books. What's been some of the most just interesting reaction? Like, what response is like open your eyes that you didn't see coming, and where does TGL go from here?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned it before, just getting the players in the first time, and then them hungry to come back and learn the game. And it is a version of simulator golf, and so it's slightly different than green grass golf. And so these guys are starting to grasp that concept. We had players in yesterday. We have players in today. Both teams this week are coming in as full teams to do practice sessions on Sunday. So everybody's taking it seriously, and that's kind of been the cool transition here, seeing, okay, wow, we need to learn this game and adapt. We want to be the best we can be at this version of golf, and make the product elevate in that form or fashion. So, and then I would say too, this is version 1, and so version 2 will be better, and version 3 will be better, and we're going to keep adapting and improving. Like our hole design, we can do lots of other things with our hole design, but we needed to start kind of at a crawl, walk, run. And so the walk will be really cool, and the run is going to be amazing when we start iterating on more course design, more different outside of the box ideas that'll really resonate with the fans.
I agree. I think there's so much potential from here. So we're so proud to be a part of it. I think getting to spend time with smart people like you. I mean, our CEO, we were talking in December, and he was like, you realize you could be in consulting or be in for 50 years and never do another moonshot project like this. It really is something that's been just fascinating to be a part of. I think the response has been super positive, and I think it's a bellwether for the future of tech and golf and where we go from here. So I want to thank each of you for joining us here. I thought it was a compelling conversation, and again, thanks to the PGA for having us sponsor this industry stage. So many smart folks. We're just really proud of our partnership with the PGA and with TGL. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, there's ash in the pages now. I've got myself lost. I was right.